The world seems obsessed with being seen, being heard, being validated. People spend hours explaining themselves, proving their worth, chasing attention that never truly satisfies. Yet the quiet ones, the ones who resist the urge to justify, to beg, to chase, hold a power that few understand. Stoicism teaches that true strength lies not in noise, but in restraint. Silence is not emptiness. It is clarity, self-respect, and control over what truly matters. When reactions feel urgent and emotions scream for expression, peace is found not in responding, but in choosing restraint. Every unspoken word, every deliberate pause reinforces dignity and shields the mind from unnecessary turmoil. In these quiet moments, insight rises, patterns emerge, power is reclaimed, not by forcing the world to see it, but by refusing to surrender it. Most people spend their lives reacting, chasing approval, defending their worth, explaining themselves to those who rarely listen. Each word given, each effort to be understood, often hands away a piece of your energy. Silence, restraint, and measured action carry more weight than 1,000 arguments. Real control is not earned through noise, but through composure, clarity, and the quiet confidence that your value does not require validation. Have you noticed how the moment you stop chasing, the world begins to notice? The moment you stop sending messages, stop explaining yourself, stop trying to convince people who have already decided what they think, something strange happens. People start wondering, they start thinking. Silence is not emptiness, it's a mirror. It reflects what you value, what you refuse to compromise, and what others only recognize once it's gone. Think about how often people give their energy away trying to be understood. Long explanations, careful arguments, emotional messages hoping someone will finally see their intentions. But every time you do that, a small piece of your power leaves with it. Silence takes that power back. In quiet moments, patterns become clearer. Energy that was once scattered, trying to be seen or validated, begins to settle. You start noticing how people behave when you no longer react instantly. When your attention is no longer available on demand, your absence begins to communicate something words never could. And something subtle shifts. When you stop performing for recognition, your presence becomes heavier, more deliberate. People sense it, not because you said anything, but because you didn't. The mind itself also changes in that quiet. When it is no longer caught in constant reaction, thoughts begin to organize themselves. Emotions settle. Perspective returns. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Silence creates that separation. It allows external chaos to remain outside, while your judgment stays intact. Hidden patterns begin to reveal themselves. You start seeing where your energy was wasted, where explanations were given to people who never intended to understand, and where your need to be acknowledged slowly replaced your ability to observe. Stillness exposes the cost of overextending yourself. Effort given without reciprocity drains vitality, but each pause restores balance. Each unspoken word becomes a boundary, a signal that your energy is no longer available for negotiation. Over time, this restraint sharpens perception. You begin to notice where you've been over-investing in other people's expectations. Insight appears quietly, not forced, not argued into existence, just recognized. Because when you stop trying to control how others see you, something remarkable happens. You start seeing them clearly, their intentions, their consistency, their character. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Silence often forces that confrontation. Without constant distraction, you face your own motives, your own fears, your own patterns. But in doing so, you also reclaim something most people lose chasing approval: self-trust. That trust changes how you move through the world. You stop arguing for your value. You stop explaining your intentions. You stop chasing clarity from people who benefit from misunderstanding you, and something surprising happens again. The people who truly matter never needed the explanation in the first place. Those aligned with your values recognize it naturally. Those who were only comfortable when you were explaining yourself begin to drift away, and neither outcome diminishes you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The things you think you need from others are often the things that steal your freedom." Recognition, approval, understanding. When you stop chasing them, a strange kind of freedom appears. You begin making decisions differently, not based on how they will be perceived, but based on whether they align with your principles. Silence sharpens judgment. Emotional noise fades. Instead of reacting instantly, you observe. Instead of correcting people's assumptions, you watch their behavior, and behavior rarely hides for long. The quiet reveals everything. Silence interrupts that imagination. It stops the endless mental arguments, the rehearsed explanations, the hypothetical conversations that drain energy without changing anything. When those disappear, something else appears in their place. Clarity. And with clarity comes discipline. The discipline to remain composed when others provoke you. The discipline to leave conversations that require you to defend your dignity. The discipline to let people misunderstand you rather than betray your own peace trying to correct them. This kind of silence is not weakness, it is authority. It signals that your attention is valuable, that your energy is deliberate, and that your identity is not something that needs to be negotiated with every opinion that crosses your path. If these reflections resonate with you, consider subscribing as a quiet commitment to your own growth, a daily reminder to keep strengthening your clarity, your discipline, and the inner fortress that Stoicism has always taught us to build. The quiet also deepens patience. You observe without immediate interference, letting events unfold naturally. Patterns in behavior, both your own and those of others, become easier to interpret. Silence brings this consciousness to life, revealing truths that were previously obscured by incessant noise and reactive engagement. As observation replaces reaction, self-mastery strengthens. Each withheld explanation, each avoided chase, teaches the value of intentionality. Actions become deliberate and rooted in clarity rather than compulsion. The subtle influence of your restraint communicates integrity, boundaries, and self-respect more powerfully than any explanation could. The energy preserved through this deliberate stillness fortifies the mind against manipulation and reduces the temptation to overreact in pursuit of understanding. The long-term effect is a quiet authority over your own experience. Decisions emerge with clarity, and the consequences of action are considered rather than reflexive. By maintaining silence and refusing to chase validation, you reclaim the freedom and control over your energy, focusing attention where it is most meaningful. Observation without reaction allows for deeper discernment of relationships. The true nature of people becomes apparent without forcing revelations. Those aligned with your values will naturally act in accordance with them, while those who are not reveal their character through inaction or inconsistency. Energy once dispersed in futile explanations now consolidates, creating a more potent and effective presence that acts from principle rather than impulse. Emotional turbulence diminishes as the mind aligns with observation rather than reaction. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." Each deliberate pause, each withheld word, is a practice of this victory. By controlling the instinct to chase, explain, or justify, you cultivate inner strength that cannot be diminished by the misunderstandings or judgments of others. Insight deepens with repeated practice of restraint. The quiet highlights the contrast between perception and reality, revealing the patterns of influence and intention that guide interactions. Each interaction is now approached with deliberation and composure, and the focus shifts to what is within your control rather than what is not. This process refines judgment and enhances both awareness and strategic thought. Through consistent practice, the balance between presence and absence becomes a tool of influence. Energy flows deliberately, attention is conserved, and decisions gain weight from clarity rather than urgency. Actions are guided by principle, and silence communicates power without the need for confrontation. Each moment of restraint is both a shield and a lesson, demonstrating that mastery lies not in noise, but in measured response. Autonomy and discernment strengthen as silence is maintained. Impulses to justify, defend, or chase attention fade as self-trust grows. In the stillness, imagination ceases to distort understanding, and reality is seen with greater accuracy. Emotional responses become intentional, energy is preserved, and decisions reflect a mind aligned with principle. Ultimately, silence is a living practice of authority and insight. Every unspoken word, every deliberate restraint, and every pause builds clarity, self-respect, and discernment. Observation replaces reaction, reflection replaces compulsion, and the mind navigates interactions with calm precision. The quiet is active, protective, and revealing, forming a foundation for a presence that is deliberate, disciplined, and profoundly influential. Energy is measured and purposeful in the cultivated quiet. Each interaction is approached with clarity and intention. Silence allows this self-knowledge to surface, revealing the alignment of values and the integrity of judgment. It transforms ordinary moments into practice, fortifying resilience and demonstrating that true power is often felt rather than spoken. Through ongoing restraint, every action, thought, and pause becomes a statement of principle. The quiet offers space for reflection, preserves energy, and cultivates discernment. It allows the mind to operate with clarity, focus, and intentionality, showing that strength is not loud, visible, or reactive, but deliberate, measured, and internal. By choosing restraint over reaction, observation over impulse, and patience over compulsion, you build a presence that communicates integrity and mastery without needing words. The practice of silence strengthens self-mastery, clarity, and influence in ways that cannot be diminished by misunderstanding or misjudgment. Through this intentional quiet, understanding emerges, energy is preserved, and actions are guided by principle rather than necessity. The mind gains precision, the heart maintains equilibrium, and every withheld word becomes a reinforcement of autonomy. The deliberate practice of silence is not absence. It is a living demonstration of strength, clarity, and disciplined presence. And in that silence, you start to hear truths that were impossible to notice amid the constant noise. The endless stream of opinions, judgments, and expectations has a way of clouding perception, making insight seem distant. By holding back and refusing to react compulsively, the mind gains space to observe rather than respond. Epictetus said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." In these moments of quiet, clarity rises, separating the essential from the trivial, and energy that was scattered begins to realign with purpose. Patterns that were invisible before emerge gradually. Repetition becomes clear in interactions, and the motivations of others start to reveal themselves. You notice where effort has been misdirected and where emotional energy was given without reciprocity. Each pause becomes an opportunity to reclaim power previously surrendered to the need for understanding or approval. Observation replaces compulsion, and the choices you make feel deliberate rather than reactionary. This stillness allows reflection on the past and present. You see the subtle ways attachment and expectation shaped behavior, how the desire to be seen or heard influenced decisions, and where internal strength was diluted. Energy is preserved, not wasted in endless explanations or chasing approval. Every moment of restraint strengthens the mind, reinforcing the understanding that self-worth is independent of recognition from others. Clarity also brings emotional refinement. The urge to justify, argue, or explain diminishes as insight increases. When silence is maintained, the mind can discern between what truly matters and what only demands attention because someone else insists. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In embracing silence, you confront the truths within yourself, finding understanding and balance without external validation. The quiet encourages patience and strategic observation. You watch without immediate interference, allowing circumstances and people to reveal their true nature. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to see patterns, intentions, and alignment without forcing outcomes. Energy that would have been dissipated in reactive behavior now consolidates, creating a presence that is focused, deliberate, and resilient. Self-mastery deepens through repeated practice of restraint. Each withheld reaction, each paused response, is an exercise in control and internal authority. Actions are measured, rooted in principle rather than impulse, and your presence communicates integrity without words. The deliberate choice to remain quiet teaches the mind to weigh consequence over compulsion and to prioritize long-term clarity over short-term reaction. The mind begins to stabilize as insight emerges from observation. Emotional turbulence diminishes because responses are guided by discernment rather than habit. By cultivating silence, you regain authority over your energy, redirecting it toward understanding, purpose, and deliberate action rather than seeking validation from external sources. Relationships also reveal themselves with greater clarity. The alignment or misalignment of others' values becomes evident without confrontation or demand. Those who are genuine naturally respond, while those who are not reveal themselves through inconsistency or absence. Energy conserved in restraint strengthens discernment, ensuring that your interactions are guided by principle rather than compulsion. Observation without immediate reaction sharpens judgment. The quiet allows you to notice the difference between perception and reality, between intention and appearance. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice discernment and measure influence carefully. Over time, deliberate silence cultivates autonomy and awareness. The impulse to defend, justify, or chase diminishes as self-trust grows. Decisions are made with clarity, and actions are aligned with values rather than external pressure. The mind operates with intention, focus, and stability, ensuring that each engagement is meaningful and deliberate. The practice of restraint transforms ordinary experiences into lessons of power and insight. Each moment of withheld explanation, each paused reaction, teaches the value of observation and the strength of measured presence. Silence provides the space for that knowledge to surface, guiding choices with discernment and reinforcing internal authority. Through continued practice, energy is concentrated and purpose sharpened. Each interaction becomes deliberate, each pause intentional, and each observation informative. The quiet communicates strength and self-respect without the need for words. Reflection replaces reaction, and the mind gains clarity, focus, and control over what is within its power. Ultimately, the silence is active and instructive. Each withheld word, each deliberate pause, and each decision to observe rather than react strengthens autonomy and cultivates insight. The mind navigates interactions with calm precision, energy is preserved, and judgment is refined. Energy circulates intentionally in this cultivated quiet. Each decision is approached with clarity and purpose. Each observation is considered, and each interaction carries the weight of discernment. The practice of silence consolidates strength, sharpens insight, and ensures that responses are guided by principle rather than compulsion. The quiet is not absence. It is active, deliberate, and transformative. Through sustained restraint, understanding deepens, energy is protected, and action is guided by principle. The mind gains precision, emotional balance is maintained, and every silent moment reinforces autonomy. The deliberate choice to remain still is a statement of discipline, focus, and quiet authority, shaping both internal mastery and outward influence with enduring clarity. Begging for closure or searching for explanations often feels necessary, as if understanding someone else's reasoning could heal your pain. Yet, chasing this kind of resolution usually deepens the wound. By expecting someone else to validate your experience, you surrender control over your own peace. If they truly cared, their actions would have shown it already. Silence becomes the truest form of closure, a way to reclaim authority over your emotions and boundaries. Walking away without explanation demonstrates that self-worth is internal and does not depend on the recognition of others. Each unspoken word reinforces dignity. You don't need to craft the perfect message, repeat yourself, or seek acknowledgement. The act of restraint communicates more than any paragraph or conversation could. The absence of reaction forces reflection in ways that words cannot. Others may wonder, question, or even regret, but the impact of your composed detachment is subtle, enduring, and profoundly transformative. It shifts the locus of power from external validation to internal mastery. This practice teaches patience and discernment, energy that would be wasted on arguments, explanations, or pleas is preserved for the decisions and relationships that truly matter. You begin to understand that closure is not something granted by others. It is something cultivated within. The calm refusal to chase, to beg, or to justify becomes a daily exercise in self-respect. Each withheld message, each silent response, strengthens your ability to act intentionally rather than reactively. The quiet also sharpens awareness of patterns in behavior. You start to see who genuinely aligns with your values and who does not. Repeatedly seeking closure from those incapable of giving it only obscured these truths. Seneca once said, "We are often more afraid than hurt, and we suffer more in anticipation than in reality." In practicing silence, you confront reality directly, free from imagined outcomes or expectations, and allow understanding to emerge naturally. Detachment becomes a tool of clarity. Without the compulsion to justify, you notice how energy flows in interactions and where it is valued or squandered. Walking away quietly signals that your peace cannot be bargained for. It conveys integrity without confrontation and preserves mental and emotional resources that would otherwise be exhausted in attempts to correct or influence others. The absence of reaction cultivates resilience. When you refuse to chase explanations, the mind becomes steady and deliberate. Patterns of misunderstanding and disappointment are observed rather than immediately addressed, providing the perspective necessary to respond in alignment with principles rather than fear or frustration. Energy spent chasing closure is redirected toward reflection, growth, and purposeful action. Over time, this deliberate silence becomes self-reinforcing. Each choice to hold back strengthens self-trust and reinforces boundaries. You notice the contrast between those who respect and value your presence naturally and those who require persuasion or compulsion to acknowledge it. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." By detaching without explanation, you elevate the quality of your inner life and reduce the influence of external chaos. Ultimately, closure is internal. It is a state of being rather than a conversation, a decision rather than a demand. Walking away, remaining quiet, and refusing to chase restores control over your emotions and clarifies where energy should be invested. Each silent act of detachment is a profound statement of self-worth, teaching that peace is cultivated through discernment, patience, and the refusal to surrender authority over your own life to others. The practice of internal closure transforms perspective. The mind no longer seeks validation from those unwilling or incapable of giving it. Emotional equilibrium is maintained because understanding is generated internally rather than externally. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." By embracing silence as closure, mastery of self is reaffirmed, and the foundation for measured, principled action is strengthened. Each silent withdrawal is a demonstration of subtle power. You act with intention, preserving energy and reinforcing boundaries. The world may not acknowledge it immediately, but the impact is profound and lasting. Silence becomes both shield and teacher, showing that true resolution does not come from explanations offered or received, but from the deliberate choice to protect and honor your own peace. Through consistent practice, the desire for external closure diminishes. Awareness of personal sovereignty grows. Relationships are evaluated on their alignment with your values rather than their ability to provide comfort or justification. By refraining from chasing closure, you cultivate a sense of internal completion. Energy is preserved for pursuits that matter, for growth that is sustainable, and for engagement that is genuine. Each moment of restraint reinforces autonomy, instills patience, and fosters the ability to act with discernment. Silence becomes a medium through which self-respect, dignity, and personal authority are exercised effortlessly. In the absence of reactive pursuit, wisdom emerges. Observing rather than chasing allows recognition of what is within your control and what is not. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice discernment and intentionality, reinforcing inner strength. The calm refusal to demand explanations or force understanding demonstrates the power of self-guided equilibrium and the profound clarity that comes from valuing your own peace above external approval. Detachment also teaches that the need for closure is often an illusion. It is an expectation imposed on life by the desire to control outcomes. Through this approach, every withheld response becomes an act of strength, and every pause is a reinforcement of autonomy. Emotional energy is protected, attention is sharpened, and understanding emerges naturally from observation and reflection. Each deliberate silence communicates integrity, reinforces boundaries, and fosters the internal closure that external validation cannot provide. The deliberate practice of detachment without explanation transforms the ordinary into profound mastery. Energy is concentrated, insight deepens, and self-respect is preserved. Silence becomes both tool and teacher, guiding perception, refining judgment, and cultivating the clarity necessary to navigate life with authority, intentionality, and calm precision. What happens when you stop reacting to manipulations, to apologies, to excuses? Silence begins to uncover truths that words often obscure. People reveal themselves through actions more than explanations, especially when their attempts to influence or provoke are met with quiet observation. Each withheld response becomes a test of character, showing who genuinely aligns with your values and who does not. By refraining from defending, clarifying, or justifying, you allow reality to emerge unfiltered. Observation without reaction creates a space where patterns become visible. Repeated behaviors that once went unnoticed now appear clearly, and the motivations behind actions reveal themselves. Energy that would have been spent correcting or responding is now preserved, allowing the mind to assess situations with greater clarity. The absence of reaction transforms perception into insight, giving you a deeper understanding of both intentions and consequences. The quiet also functions as a natural mirror for behavior. Without the distraction of your input, others' tendencies are exposed. Misalignment, inconsistency, and manipulation are illuminated, while those who act with integrity and respect are naturally highlighted. Each moment of restraint is both protective and revealing, allowing judgment to form without interference or bias from emotional responses. This practice also strengthens the capacity for discernment. You begin to recognize which relationships, interactions, and investments of energy are genuinely reciprocal and which are imbalanced. By observing rather than responding, you can focus attention on what is meaningful and align action with principle rather than compulsion. Each silent act becomes a lesson in patience, awareness, and self-mastery. Clarity emerges as restraint is maintained. The urge to react diminishes, and the mind gains stability. Emotional turbulence subsides because the need to control or correct diminishes, replaced by insight and understanding. Marcus Aurelius once said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." In the same way, silence allows life to be observed fully, revealing what is authentic and what is superficial without interference. Patterns in others' behavior now appear without distortion. The words of the insincere can no longer mislead, and apologies without alignment are no longer persuasive. Silence becomes a lens for truth, separating appearance from reality. The quiet demonstrates boundaries without conflict, authority without force, and perception without manipulation. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to discern and prioritize what truly deserves attention. Each withheld reaction also teaches the value of self-restraint. By not engaging in arguments or explanations, the mind preserves energy, allowing reflection and understanding to deepen. Emotional maturity grows as the urge to respond is replaced by observation and contemplation. Seneca once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In practicing this silence, mastery over impulse becomes visible not through action, but through measured inaction. Ultimately, observing without reacting reshapes perspective. The absence of immediate response clarifies truth, reveals character, and protects your peace. The quiet becomes a statement, a demonstration of internal authority and self-respect. Decisions and judgments are guided by principle rather than emotion, and clarity emerges naturally from restraint. The act of withholding communication teaches more than words ever could, creating a space where understanding, alignment, and insight can flourish unobstructed. Through consistent practice, silence develops into a tool for discernment. Energy is preserved, attention becomes deliberate, and perception sharpens. Observing without reacting allows this self-knowledge to surface, revealing the intentions of others, the value of your own presence, and the clarity of your principles. The quiet reinforces boundaries, strengthens judgment, and demonstrates the power of intentional restraint. In maintaining this quiet, the world begins to speak through behavior rather than language. Truths that were once hidden in explanation become visible through absence and observation. Each act of non-reaction strengthens autonomy, sharpens insight, and ensures that engagement is guided by principle rather than compulsion. The practice of silent observation cultivates a mind that is calm, discerning, and resilient, capable of seeing clearly even when words attempt to obscure reality. Through deliberate restraint, each interaction becomes an opportunity to witness authenticity. The quiet amplifies alignment, clarifies intentions, and reinforces internal authority. By refraining from reactive explanations or engagement, mastery over impulse is practiced and strengthened. Each moment of silence communicates integrity, fosters understanding, and allows the truth of actions to be recognized without interference. The deliberate choice not to respond, to observe rather than explain, transforms ordinary encounters into lessons of perception, patience, and judgment. Energy is preserved, insight deepens, and understanding emerges naturally from watching rather than reacting. The quiet demonstrates strength, integrity, and authority that words cannot replicate, creating a framework for discernment, alignment, and principled action that endures. In every withheld reaction, the mind sharpens, the heart steadies, and the clarity of perception expands. Each pause, each silent observation becomes a measure of discipline and self-respect. Silence functions as both shield and teacher, protecting energy while revealing truth. The deliberate practice of observation without reaction cultivates awareness, strengthens judgment, and ensures that every engagement is approached with principle, intentionality, and enduring clarity. Not explaining yourself is the highest form of confidence. Each time you feel the urge to justify, to clarify, or to convince, you risk tying your self-worth to the perceptions of others. When the mind and heart are anchored in principle rather than approval, the need for external validation naturally dissolves. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Do not waste life speculating about others unless it benefits you mutually." By embodying your values quietly, you cultivate an authority that cannot be diminished by misunderstanding or judgment. Confidence is not loud. It does not seek to dominate or persuade. It moves with deliberate composure, measured in action and restraint rather than in words. The energy you preserve by refusing to explain yourself strengthens focus, clarity, and presence. People who are aligned with your principles notice instinctively, while those who are not gradually fade from influence, and either outcome preserves your integrity. The act of withholding explanation also reinforces boundaries. When you stop justifying decisions, behaviors, or choices, you clarify what is acceptable in your life. Energy that would have been spent correcting others' perceptions is now concentrated on growth, reflection, and intentional action. Each silent decision fortifies autonomy, shaping a presence that communicates worth without needing translation. This quiet assertion of self does more than preserve energy. It cultivates discernment. By observing how others respond to your non-reaction, you gain insight into character, intentions, and alignment. The subtle feedback of behavior becomes clearer when it is untainted by your attempts to explain or persuade. Each withheld word serves as a lens, revealing authenticity and intention in ways that explanation never could. The strength of internal confidence grows as repetition reinforces it. Each moment you resist the urge to justify builds resilience and reinforces understanding that your value exists independently of acknowledgement. The mind learns to trust its own judgment rather than the fluctuating recognition of others. Each choice to remain silent strengthens the sense of self as grounded, stable, and undisturbed by external noise. Confidence expressed through silence is a quiet power. It does not provoke, compel, or demand recognition. Instead, it acts as a natural filter, showing who respects and aligns with your values without confrontation. The quiet does not require argument. It allows reality and principles to speak for themselves. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to exercise discernment, preserve energy, and reinforce intentional presence. Detachment from the need to justify also fosters patience. The mind becomes steady, the heart remains centered, and judgment emerges without compulsion. Energy is focused on what is essential rather than scattered in attempts to influence perception. Epictetus once said, "No great thing is created suddenly." Similarly, confidence is cultivated gradually, through consistent practice of restraint and principled silence, not by reactive explanation or immediate validation. Ultimately, confidence without explanation conveys clarity, authority, and autonomy. Each silent action communicates integrity more effectively than words. When you stop seeking recognition, you create a space where understanding, respect, and alignment occur naturally without coercion. The mind, freed from the compulsion to justify, acts with intention, decisiveness, and composure. The absence of explanation clarifies priorities and magnifies presence. By conserving energy previously spent defending perceptions, attention is focused on what truly matters. Insight and awareness deepen, and the ability to act with deliberation grows. Self-respect is maintained because each choice is guided by principle rather than by the need to influence others. In silence, you learn to trust the feedback of reality rather than the fluctuations of opinion. Those who value your presence notice it naturally, while those who do not are revealed without need for confrontation. Confidence emerges not from external affirmation, but from internal alignment. Through this discipline, every decision, every interaction, and every pause reinforces autonomy and composure. Energy is preserved, judgment is refined, and insight deepens. Silence communicates without words, conveys strength without force, and fosters clarity without debate. Confidence grows quietly, naturally, and undeniably. Over time, the consistent practice of embodying values without explanation creates an unshakable presence. It teaches the mind to prioritize principle over perception and reality over expectation. Wisdom emerges from observation and restraint rather than from argument or persuasion. The deliberate choice not to justify yourself becomes both a shield and a tool for personal growth. The quiet assertion of self-worth allows for strategic engagement. Actions are aligned, energy is focused, and discernment is sharpened. Each moment of restraint strengthens internal authority and cultivates trust in judgment. Relationships and interactions are filtered through principle rather than impulse, and each silent choice reinforces the stability of presence. In maintaining this composed silence, the mind and heart operate in harmony. Autonomy is preserved, energy is concentrated, and clarity guides every decision. By refusing to explain yourself, that knowledge is exercised continually, allowing presence, insight, and authority to flourish naturally. Ultimately, confidence expressed through silence is an enduring power. It does not require validation, argument, or justification. It communicates value through presence, integrity through restraint, and authority through composure. Each unspoken word, each deliberate pause, and each withheld explanation reinforces self-mastery, demonstrating that true confidence is quiet, deliberate, and entirely self-sustained. Silence also allows detachment to teach lessons that words cannot convey. Walking away calmly, without anger or dramatics, creates a space that others cannot ignore. The absence of your presence becomes a mirror, reflecting what was once taken for granted and forcing reflection that cannot be imposed by argument. By refusing to react to provocations, you reclaim control over your own experience. The games, the manipulations, the need for validation, they lose power because you no longer feed them. Distance itself becomes instructive, demonstrating that your peace cannot be negotiated or stolen. Each moment of restraint reinforces internal boundaries, showing that understanding and respect are earned through alignment, not demand. This deliberate detachment clarifies priorities. You begin to recognize which relationships, interactions, and commitments are worth your attention and which are distractions. Your absence communicates without confrontation, revealing who values presence, who respects integrity, and who thrives on controlling your responses. In learning to let go, you teach others without words, demonstrating the impact of your principles through consistency and calm. The quiet also strengthens perception. Freed from the impulse to respond immediately, the mind can discern patterns and intentions more clearly. You observe rather than react, noticing who respects boundaries and who attempts to manipulate or provoke. Each withheld reaction is an exercise in self-mastery, sharpening judgment and reinforcing autonomy. Emotional energy is preserved, attention is refined, and clarity emerges naturally. Walking away without explanation cultivates inner authority. You stop giving power to expectations and start measuring influence through principle rather than reaction. The quiet signals that your decisions are guided by your own standards, not by the approval or disapproval of others. Each silent choice reinforces the understanding that peace is more valuable than temporary validation and that composure communicates more effectively than words ever could. Over time, detachment becomes a form of strategic presence. The world responds not to noise, but to consistency, integrity, and intentionality. Actions, rather than arguments, shape perception. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." By walking away calmly, you cultivate a mind that values clarity, resilience, and focus, demonstrating that true power is expressed through measured choices rather than impulsive engagement. This practice also fosters self-respect. Each moment you choose silence over reaction, patience over compulsion, you assert your autonomy. You maintain dignity while observing the consequences of others' actions without interference. The quiet becomes a shield, preserving energy for reflection, growth, and decisions aligned with principle. Insight emerges naturally when the mind is freed from the constant need to defend, explain, or justify. Ultimately, detachment through silence transforms perception and relationships. By not engaging in unnecessary explanations or reactions, you allow reality to reveal itself. The patterns of behavior, the intentions behind words, and the value of alignment become clear without confrontation. Through calm withdrawal and measured presence, self-knowledge deepens, judgment strengthens, and every interaction becomes an opportunity to observe and act with clarity and purpose. Through sustained practice, the quiet becomes an instrument of empowerment. Each withheld word and deliberate pause reinforces autonomy, cultivates discernment, and preserves energy. The mind navigates interactions with precision, the heart remains steady, and decisions are guided by principle rather than emotion. Detachment teaches without speaking, influences without force, and demonstrates that peace is a choice, integrity is observable, and presence is more meaningful when unclaimed by compulsion. In these moments of intentional silence, strength and clarity become inseparable. The absence of reaction protects inner equilibrium, enhances perception, and communicates authority more profoundly than any argument. The deliberate practice of detachment ensures that attention, energy, and judgment are applied where they matter most. Each act of measured withdrawal affirms that autonomy, self-respect, and peace are the highest forms of influence and the truest expressions of personal power. Consider the internal shift that occurs when you stop chasing approval or feeling the need to explain yourself. Each moment spent resisting the urge to justify or react is a moment of energy reclaimed. Your attention sharpens, your self-respect strengthens, and your focus becomes directed toward what truly matters. The mind, no longer scattered by the need for external validation, gains stability and insight. External events lose their ability to disrupt your equilibrium. The pressures of judgment, expectation, and misunderstanding no longer dictate your state of mind. By holding silence, you construct an internal power structure that cannot be shaken by manipulation or fleeting opinions. Every deliberate pause reinforces autonomy, allowing clarity to emerge naturally from observation rather than from reactive engagement. The act of withholding reaction also cultivates patience. Each ignored provocation, each choice to remain composed, demonstrates mastery over impulse. The mind learns to measure response, weighing principle against compulsion. The subtle power of self-restraint becomes apparent as you notice how interactions unfold differently when energy is preserved and attention is focused intentionally. Confidence grows quietly, without need for demonstration. The sense of authority emerges not from assertion, but from alignment between values and action. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In practicing deliberate silence, that power becomes tangible, shaping every choice and interaction with precision and integrity. Observation without reaction becomes a tool for discernment. Patterns of behavior in others reveal themselves clearly when they are no longer amplified by your need to justify or explain. Energy once lost in fruitless efforts to influence perception now concentrates on reflection, insight, and action, guided by principle rather than urgency. Each moment of restraint reinforces clarity, reinforcing the foundation of a stable and deliberate mind. The mind gains resilience as calm observation replaces impulsive engagement. Emotional turbulence diminishes because your inner state is not dependent on external acknowledgement. Each instance of holding back becomes a measure of strength, reinforcing understanding that true influence and control emerge from internal mastery rather than from attempts to steer the perceptions or reactions of others. Detachment through silence also sharpens judgment. Every moment where words are withheld allows evaluation of intentions and consistency in behavior to become evident. The quiet functions as both a lens and a shield, illuminating authenticity and protecting energy. Through continued practice, the absence of reactive explanations becomes a form of strategic presence. The mind no longer seeks to defend or clarify unnecessarily. Instead, it observes, discerns, and acts with deliberate intention. Autonomy is preserved, energy is concentrated, and the ability to respond from principle rather than impulse deepens. Each silent choice reinforces internal authority and cultivates a clarity that cannot be undermined by external circumstances. Over time, this practice transforms perception and engagement. The subtlety of silence demonstrates confidence, integrity, and resilience in ways that words cannot. Attention is directed toward what aligns with values, and energy is shielded from fruitless confrontation. Each moment of restraint communicates self-respect, composure, and discernment without the need for explanation. The quiet strengthens both perception and presence. By refusing to explain, justify, or chase, you allow the world to reveal itself clearly. Every interaction becomes a measure of alignment, and each decision is made with full awareness of consequence and principle. Silence ensures that reaction is deliberate, measured, and guided by understanding rather than compulsion. Internal power grows as consistent restraint reinforces awareness and authority. The mind, unburdened by the need to prove or justify, observes with clarity and acts with deliberation. Each ignored provocation, each withheld explanation, becomes a step toward building a presence that is grounded, stable, and aligned with principles rather than external pressures. Energy is preserved, judgment is sharpened, and focus deepens through the deliberate practice of silence. The internal state becomes a fortress, resilient to manipulation, impervious to judgment, and aligned with principle. Confidence no longer requires expression through words, and influence arises naturally from composure, presence, and deliberate observation. Ultimately, each choice to refrain from chasing or explaining becomes a lesson in self-mastery. Attention, energy, and action are concentrated where they matter most. Through this practice, the mind, heart, and attention align. Every withheld word, every deliberate pause, every ignored provocation strengthens autonomy, reinforces clarity, and cultivates insight. Silence becomes both shield and teacher, guiding perception, focus, and intentional action. The internal power built through restraint transforms presence into authority, observation into understanding, and quiet into the strongest form of influence. With each intentional pause, composure grows, energy is conserved, and self-respect is preserved. The mind navigates challenges, interactions, and decisions with clarity and purpose. Confidence becomes internalized, resilience is reinforced, and every silent choice demonstrates that mastery over self is the truest form of power, guiding action with precision, integrity, and enduring authority. Finally, this silence is not an absence of care. It is care refined and elevated. It is care directed toward your own growth, your own peace, and the preservation of your energy. When you stop explaining, you stop pouring yourself into spaces that cannot hold you, and when you detach, you no longer participate in cycles that erode your strength. Each choice to remain silent becomes a deliberate act of self-preservation, shaping your presence and protecting your mind from unnecessary turmoil. Through this practice, interactions take on a new significance. Every misunderstanding, every slight, every rejection becomes a mirror, reflecting the principles you embody rather than the chaos of circumstance. The restraint of silence communicates authority and integrity more effectively than words ever could. Energy is concentrated on what aligns with your values, and each deliberate pause reinforces the clarity of judgment, the stability of presence, and the consistency of intention. Mastering this silence transforms perception both internally and externally. It allows you to witness events without immediate reaction, to observe behaviors without compulsion, and to act in alignment with principle rather than impulse. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to exercise discernment, demonstrating that your dignity does not depend on acknowledgement, explanation, or external validation. The quiet asserts sovereignty over self, and your energy is preserved for pursuits and relationships that merit it. The act of detachment also fosters resilience. Emotional turbulence diminishes because your internal state is no longer dictated by the expectations or judgments of others. Each withheld explanation strengthens autonomy and reinforces the sense that self-respect is an internal practice rather than a response to circumstance. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. In silence, the heart and mind align, and clarity arises naturally from observation, reflection, and deliberate restraint." Over time, the consistent exercise of silent detachment cultivates a quiet authority that cannot be undermined by misunderstanding or misjudgment. Actions, rather than explanations, shape perception, and your presence is measured by integrity rather than assertion. Energy that would have been expended on defending, justifying, or persuading is now preserved for growth, contemplation, and aligned action. Each deliberate pause and choice to remain composed reinforces internal mastery. This practice of care through silence also clarifies priorities. By disengaging from cycles that diminish strength, you recognize what is worthy of attention and what is not. The mind becomes a tool for strategic discernment rather than a vessel for reactive engagement. Each withheld response becomes an assertion of principle, and each moment of composure communicates authority, boundaries, and aligned purpose without confrontation or drama. The mastery of this silence elevates confidence. When you no longer explain, defend, or chase validation, your energy consolidates and presence gains weight. Decisions and actions are guided by internal clarity rather than external expectation. The world may not always understand your restraint, and that is irrelevant. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Silence allows this self-knowledge to manifest, creating a presence that commands respect not through words, but through consistent integrity. Ultimately, the deliberate choice to remain silent transforms ordinary experiences into lessons of internal sovereignty. Each unspoken word, each withheld explanation, each act of detachment reinforces autonomy, sharpens discernment, and cultivates insight. The mind, freed from compulsion, acts with precision. The heart, untethered from external validation, remains steady. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to demonstrate mastery of self, and each moment of silence communicates strength, clarity, and dignity. In practicing this elevated care, peace becomes a cultivated state rather than a fleeting consequence of circumstance. Energy is preserved, judgment is sharpened, and understanding emerges naturally from observation and reflection. The quiet functions as both shield and teacher, protecting what is valuable while revealing truth and principle. Your sovereignty is asserted silently, and your presence gains authority without needing explanation or validation. Through repeated practice, the mind internalizes this discipline. Every act of measured silence reinforces the principles that guide thought, action, and energy. Attention is focused on what truly matters, emotional influence is contained, and clarity is cultivated. Each withheld response, each deliberate pause, becomes a reinforcement of autonomy, self-respect, and internal power. Ultimately, the mastery of silence demonstrates that care for oneself is the foundation of all strength. Each unspoken word, each moment of restraint, and each act of detachment conveys the value of internal authority, clarity, and dignity. The world may not fully understand, and that is inconsequential. The true expression of mastery lies in the deliberate choice to preserve energy, uphold principles, and assert sovereignty silently. This is the quiet power that endures, unwavering and profoundly transformative. Your silence is your strength. Every deliberate pause, every unspoken word, every moment you choose restraint over reaction builds clarity, dignity, and self-mastery. Carry that quiet authority into your life and let your presence, even in stillness, speak louder than any words ever could. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. Take a moment now to watch one of the suggested videos on the screen and continue strengthening your mind, your clarity, and your inner fortress.